Okay, so this is July 3rd, 2015, the Drupal 8 Critical Issues meeting. And the way we do these meetings is we go around in a circle and talk about what we are working on and figure out things that block us and then discuss them and then unblock each other and then everybody's happy at the end. So looking forward to a productive meeting today as well. And since I'm leading this meeting and the first one in my list is Alex with the icons here, then Alex, let's start.
It's always me. Okay, yeah, so this week it's the Criticals D8 Accelerate Sprint in London, which I attended yesterday. Unfortunately, I can't join them all today because I have to look after my son this afternoon. But it means that there's like loads of focus on Criticals, if there wasn't before. I think there was. I specifically have been working on child issues of the safe markup document every safe markup set call. So, let's see. And the one that has just got to RDBC, excitingly, is the patch that removes safe markup sets from the rendering do render method, which means that we no longer store like all of the rendered HTML in the safe markup list, which is great for just general performance. We save like half a meg on the permissions page, for example, anything that does like lots and lots of rendering. But it's also good for when we do like form posts and batches. At the moment, we set the entire safe string list the whole time. We kind of pass it down the chain. So like in a batch, it'll grow and grow and grow. And then in every form submission, on every post, it kind of gets saved into form state. So this will help with some of the memory issues we're seeing there. And that's now RDBC. And the other one that I'm working on, and I have a new patch for, which will be green, is about removing safe markup set from within the XSS filtering. At the moment, we've kind of like got a circular dependency between the safe markup class and the XSS class, and this is resolving that by moving all the safe markup setting into the safe markup class. Yeah, and I'm just trying to review any critical that gets to RDBC as soon as possible so people can make progress and get them in. So that's me.
Yay. Okay. Andre?
Hey, so I just started working again on Drupal, and I think I'm gonna start with some Drupal CI stuff. For example, the SQLite tests are still failing on Drupal CI. I'm gonna try to investigate that, and I don't know, whatever comes up here this week. That's about it.
Okay. That makes sense. Daniel?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I'm also here at the sprint in London, and my main focus, especially yesterday, was to remove support for count Ajax URL. I think Tim and I made really good progress, and it's just about like a matter of detail what's left there. And beside of that, yeah, whatever comes up in the sprint. Next one.
Okay. Looks like everyone has short reports today. Fabian?
I've been mainly working on the rebuilding service container issue. I know that Chix has an alternative approach. However, Daniel's benchmarks seem to have shown it's slower. I also spoke with Catch, and he was still in favor of me trying to do my approach there. I finally was able to pass the Symfony test suite with my container. The main thing missing was configurator and scope, and it was a little hard because the Symfony test suite in parts is not as extensive as I like test suite to be. I still feel we need some of our own, but overall this seems to be a feasible approach. Without my doubts were kind of like, well, if it not has the same interface, maybe there are problems down the road, but that does not seem to be the case. It seems we can very well support everything. Besides that, I've worked on context and conditions, condition plugins, and contexts for the other things. I've also, outside of the direct Drupal 8 work, critical work there, worked some on ESI to ensure that Drupal core is fit for it in that. This is only relevant for the criticals call because so far I can say that except one issue that is already critical and where the outcome would be very much in favor, there's nothing critical missing for ESI support in 8.1. Yeah, that's another one. Security problem is optimizing user. I've put lots of reviews in things like the support for the Ajax URL, form state set cached, when at cache metadata created. Just currently waiting on Krell's feedback. Wim will show more, and yeah. But overall, very happy with progress we have, and I think we are still nearing the finish line in many things, and that's great. Yeah, that's my update.
Sounds great. Super. Francesco?
Hey, so this week I've been helping with the node revision cannot be reverted per translation issue, which is finally closed. And then with this one, let me paste it in the chat. Here it is. And then I've been working here at the sprint on remove entity form interface validate and stop using button level validation by default in entity forms. And I was hoping to just having to review /RTBC it, but it seems it's a bit more complex than that because actually the current proposed solution will imply not very small disruption, because basically right now we have entity forms that are invoking form level validation handlers, even if a submit handler or a validation handler on the button level is invoked. And if this patch goes in, basically we will get back to the regular core behavior, which prevents form level handlers from running if button level handlers were executed. And so we are going to risk to basically break all the form level validation for entity forms as soon as a module introduces a button level validation handler, and that's the same for submission, obviously. So I was trying a proof of concept patch to get around that, and yeah, I will need a few reviews and feedback on that. And in parallel, I'm working on the field item interface issue. Field item interface methods are only invoked for SQL storage and are inconsistent with hooks. And that one should be very close. Burden just reviewed it. I was about to post a new patch addressing his review. And then we should mostly done, I think. And that's all for me.
Okay, Lee?
So this morning I spoke with Tim Plunkett about the way forward on removing the block contexts or the block event, and I think that there is a possibility that the work there can fit in well with a need that they have in Contrib in Page Manager. They have an open issue around creating a context stack because they have similar issues. Instead of using a block event, though, they're using a page manager context event, but it's a similar kind of problem. So what the patch I've got up there while it's green is a little bit clunky still. It's still got a little bit of carryover from the event-based system, and so I'm going to explore this stack-based approach to try and remove some of that clunkiness and address some of the concerns from the reviews. So I think that there's a way forward there, which is half the battle. I've also worked today on creating a test coverage for that additional uncaught exception, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to the open discussion. And we had someone come along to critical office hours today in my time zone, Daniel Rose, and write a change record, so that was another one closed. And I also went back to Daniel's approach on the one around SA Core 2014-02, only checking the internal cache. So basically, that one I basically went to the bottom of the list, so that one was one that hadn't been moved for a while. That's me.
Okay, thank you. Catch.
Yeah, so I've been mainly reviewing issues. Had a longish discussion about the param converter cache context issue with Daniel and Larry last night. I think we got somewhere, but it didn't make it back to the issue, so I've tried to write that up today. Other than that, I don't know, the churn on critical issues is really fast at the moment, so week to week I'm actually forgetting which ones I was looking at since the last week, but I guess that's a good thing. So, yep, that's it for me at the moment.
Yeah, I agree that that's a good thing. Sasha?
Yes, morning. I'm also at the Sprint. I have been working on the condition plugins and cache context issue. It was at VC last evening, and there has been a review from Alex Pott. I'm currently addressing this, and then it should get committed soon. And then I will switch to other performance and caching issues. Maybe also look at that block context, the other one, probably a bit. That's it from my side.
Okay, I guess we'll have stuff to talk about then. Wim?
Okay, there you go then.
Works now.
Yeah, okay. Use my mic. Just so can you hear me now? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Some strange computer stuff is going on here. So I'm still working on the cacheability issues. So that's this bunch of criticals, and mostly in the past few days I've been reviewing issues. So for example, the conditions and context one that Berdir is working on that he just mentioned, the Ajax form state issue that Daniel mentioned, and Peter Franson will likely be working on the numerous param converters in core issue, the critical that Catch just mentioned. We have been having discussions about the security problem with optimizing cache keys, cache contexts as well. Laurie has been working on that, and we're experimenting with a potential solution, the one that seems the most promising so far. And so for now, I think I will continue to do review work because many issues are moving forward at the same time, as Catch mentioned. And then I hope that Krell, Larry, will be able to post his review of the rendered cache metadata critical, which is still at needs review and is very close to RTPC, we think. That's this one. Krell seems to be mostly on board. He just has some final concerns. And so once that has been addressed, we will be able to work on the link CSRF tokens critical more, which I've already got a patch for, but is at least partially blocked on the rendered cache metadata one.
And so then all the cacheability criticals are moving forwards. Several are close, and the meta cacheability critical, the finalized cache context one, I am trying to get that demoted to major in the next few days as well, because as soon as everything that is a child issue in there is either critical or fully analyzed to be okay with a major or lower priority, then we can demote that issue. And so I will try to get that done in the next few days as well, so that would be another less critical. And that's it for me.
Okay. Then I'm the last one, I guess. So I've been working on a lot of things that have been mentioned already in the chat. So I worked on the translate user edited configuration permission needs to be marked as restricted. This one, and then there was another pretty related critical about XSS attacks possible with config translation, which is I've been arguing a lot for it to be demoted to major, and it was demoted to major after all. Although then we'll need some issue to include the permission in the security policy. So that we still need to resolve that part in some way, or otherwise we'll need yet one more critical to make sure that in some way the XSS is covered. And then last week we decided on a very good plan for the twig trans tag debug PHP injection problem, which I helped resolve, and Laurie wrote a lot of good tests for it, so that landed as well. And then I was also involved in the param cumbers issue, which is 251.27.18. Also pasted in chat, which is very related to where we decide on language for entities and where we upcast things and how we upcast things to the right language and who should know what and how should cache be integrated with that. So plenty of stuff. I don't have specifics to discuss. I caught that there is some overlap in what Berthier and Lee is working on. If that's to be discussed, and if there's anything else, then feel free to bring up questions now.
So Sasha, like the review that I just posted on the condition plugins that should provide cache context. Do you think it's worth discussing, like, about whether the idea of moving the cacheable dependency interface up to the context aware plugin base is a good idea? Or do you just think it is a good idea?
I think it is. I moved it locally, so unless Wim has a different opinion, then I'm fine with doing this.
I need to look at it in detail, but if both you think fine, I probably will think the same.
So for everyone who doesn't have like ears on the call, I think Wim said he needs to look at it in detail before you can have an opinion. So it sounds fine. Wim, you need a microphone.
Yeah, I do agree that it's a good idea to not only solve it for blocks, but I think the plugin system is very much made with context in mind, with all the type data, etc. So if we don't do this move now, we'll run into problems later again, and that's obviously not what we want.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. I was worried about like Page Manager or something having a different type of context-aware plugin, and then having to add this after they forgot to do it, because in the same way that like we have like two things that are now doing it, like the condition plugins are doing it and the block plugins are doing it. So it seems to me like functionality that would be useful. Yeah, cool. I don't have anything else on that.
Any other questions we should figure out, or concerns with solutions?
So Daniel mentioned that we wanted to discuss the uncalled exception one, which I'll grab the link from.
Daniel?
Yeah, I can talk. I think Lee was trying to talk. Yeah, so the issue, additional uncalled exception thrown while handling exception after service changes, pretty much is all about like how do we do things sane in case somehow in Drupal is broken. And the current patch from Lee, or rather from Akitendo, still tries to render the page in a nice way in case you have an exception, but in case that fails, it provides an alternative, but I think that's wrong. I think in case something is broken, we should fail immediately and then just render the exception in a way that it's as plain as possible, no HTML, no Drupal style, or something else. What do you think about that?
So basically, you're proposing we remove the bare renderer in the exception path and replace it with something similar to what's in that Drupal panic function. That
yeah, pretty much print. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much print the exception and be done.
Yeah, is there another reason for the bare HTML render? Is that used in install or update or anywhere else, or is it only used in?
Oh yeah. I mean, the bare itself is fine. I mean, there are use cases for in the installer and other places. So we would just replace the usage of it or remove the usage of it. Yeah.
From my perspective, I wish we'd made this change like 3 years ago. Was trying to get the kernel in, because like the number of times we fought with like exceptions being thrown after exceptions being thrown after exceptions being thrown because we were trying to do stuff in the exception handler. This was like ridiculous. And I think the kind of like the current pattern of trying to render an exception within the look of your site is. It's getting in the way of the primary purpose of the exception, which is to communicate to a developer what's gone wrong. And if in production you have exceptions showing, then you've got a misconfigured site.
Yeah, well, it was, to be honest, to write a test to make it fail was kind of tricky because the current error handler, if the theme manager is registered, it automatically flicks into maintenance mode, and which then triggers error displayable to be yes. So we probably should touch that at the same time, because I agree that we shouldn't be printing errors in production, but I think from my debugging this morning, I think that as soon as if the theme manager exists, then that overrides the setting of error displayable because it sets the maintenance mode constant, and then from then on out, it's error display all error display is on.
Yeah, and again, that's like born of frustration of fighting like the system rather than it helping a developer. Like I'm pretty sure that like a lot of these changes were made by Sun like a year and a half ago, whilst trying to make sense of all of this.
I think I don't remember the exact issue, but we changed something with the error display settings in config, and I think it was done at the same time as that.
Yeah. And
so
I don't know. From my perspective, it's like we should always respect the error displayable setting, and the fact that we're not is an indication of something kind of smelly. And yeah, it's. But then again, I think maybe we default to error displayable off, and so the idea is that if you do have an exception being thrown early by whilst you're trying to get Drupal up and running, then you'll see it. But it's that again also feels wrong. At that point, we should probably try to catch those exceptions and help the user set up Drupal if that's what we want to do.
So could we start with it at a display type level, and then once we successfully bootstrap, switch to the config?
Yeah.
But either way, I think Daniel's written 2 additional tests, and we've got another test, so we've got 3 tests, and so we should be able to remove that chunk and fall back to the. So I'll put these notes on the issue now.
Cool.
Okay, I think Fabian had stuff to discuss, if I recall that right.
No, not really to discuss. I was merely giving my update. We are good on all fronts.
Okay.
Well, I have a question for Fabian. So there are currently 2 issues dealing with the container. There's the one from you, which is about storing the container configuration in cache and then use our own container. And then there's the one from Jax, which is about storing the compiled container in cache and then match it. And then it's actually stored in up cache as well. Do you have an opinion whether the one from Jax is valuable for itself to get in as alternative to your approach, or whether it should be an optional thing on top?
If your benchmark is correct, and it really takes 8 milliseconds, that's pretty much 2 times the time it takes to go to load the overall bootstrap with container loading. So I was worried about unserialized taking 0.4 milliseconds just in comparison, or the database taking like 0.2 milliseconds to load something from the database. I think the op cache might not be as efficient as Chix had hoped. And Catch had some early benchmarks show me where that was kind of the same. So unless there's a benchmarking error, then there's a problem. The other thing that the compiled container potentially gives us, there's other alternatives as well, is that we would be able to change parameters and even definitions on the fly before running the container, and that is something that both you, Daniel, and Alex very much wanted when we talked about the container issue in LA. So I think it's still worth it. It's possible to make it performant, and yeah, knowing a lot of the Symfony code, it's also all not that complicated as one thinks containers are. It's actually a pretty simple concept overall. So on the other hand, if we don't want to have a performance regression, same as with Chix, saying, well, we could use PHP storage for the single case one, someone could switch out the cache service to a raw PHP storage backend, and then we would also not have the unserialized overhead for the getting. The other thing that the container would give us in general is we could have a log on the rebuild, etc., because we can have a very easily defined bootstrap container, which gives more possibilities in enabling a fast performant Drupal system and gives us a little more independence of having everything in the container and everything relying on the container. And without the container, we can't do anything. And I think that would also be a win for Drupal in general. So as it's a feasible approach, as the test suite was passed, and the scope is not that complicated as I feared, and really we should only implementing the interface, not extending the container class. I think that should be fine, because nothing should be relying on anything internal to the container.
Yeah, talking about implementation, you mentioned earlier that you implemented scopes. Is there a reason for that? I mean, scopes is a concept that won't exist in Symfony 3.0, for example, and it's also something we really shouldn't support in the first place, because I think it's just adding another level of complexity you don't need.
The point is, scopes can obviously be implemented very simple. Even very performant is just some additional said. Obviously, they cost. So if we can agree, well, we are totally okay with a container that does not support scope nor synchronized services, which are deprecated in Symfony 2.8 already. I'm totally on board with that. If you say we ship with a reduced feature set, but I know from those putting in Symfony that one of the goals was kind of that Symfony applications can run in parallel with Drupal in that, and for that I feel that compatibility is important. But that's why I made it past the test suite, to ensure of what is needed. But I'm fine either way.
I think given that scopes are deprecated in Symfony 2 and won't be there in 3, and the reason that they're not there is that they cause it's difficult to manage and side effects. I think that we should definitely not prioritize them, and if our container didn't support them, I think that that's fine.
Okay, then we need 3 lines added and we are compatible.
Oh, that's nice.
The configurator was missing, unless the configurator is duplicated too, which I did not see.
Because it's also planning for the future.
Yes, for sure.
We at some point we're going to probably put Drupal 8 on Symfony 3 if we've then got to handle Drupal projects which have used scopes in their Drupalite container. It seems like unnecessary work for things that we already know that are going to happen.
Great. I'm totally on board. I don't like scopes. But I felt it was important to show. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, then next steps for that are figuring out simple way to set up a cache factory for the database backend. That's something where someone could help me, because I still don't get how they actually work totally, but I've also not tried that hard. Loading the definition from cache, and then some benchmarks, which in the beginning will be a little bit worse, but as I've done a lot of work on the page cache issue, I know kind of exactly what takes what kind of performance and what needs to happen. And now with the proxy services in, things will be much better from the start anyway, because one of the biggest chunks of where a compiled container is better is that it does not have to deep search every array, but as written on the issue, I've got an optimized PHP array dumper that writes more like a machine parsable than human parsable format, which can still be changed. So, but it's a lot more optimized for the runtime case, and but both are equally working well and performant. Yeah. So we gain a bootstrap container, very simple one that we can use. So we can have pre-kernel services if you want to, and we also gain the possibility to change definitions, or if we exchange the Symfony compiler path for the parameter resolving, we could choose to not resolve all parameters, but just certain ones, because some parameter resolving makes sense, other ones does not make sense for the Drupal use case, and then we could, for example, change parameters even before loading the container as a follow-up, and that would allow, I think, to remove some hacks that we currently have to do, where we have to rebuild the container, even though we would know kind of the configuration at kernel time, and we would just need to inject it. So that would be the wins gained from that issue. Any more questions?
If not for this one, then any other issue that people want to discuss that we can move forward. Like if we move off this call, then you'll suddenly realize that we should have discussed something. Oh, now we don't have the opportunity anymore.
I can just report that Peter Frentzen worked on reproducing critical upgrade path bug from 6 to 7, and he actually managed to reproduce the problem, so that's also an easy or a potential one less critical at some point. Really good work from him.
Was that with user pictures though?
No, what he did was so he reproduced the problem by cleaning up the files on disk in the meantime. So in case you upload a file, then remove the file from disk and then upload it again. It's the same file name. Then you end up with 2 entries in the database with different timestamps and file sizes. Does that make sense for you?
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. If that's and then if we can reproduce the upgrade path bug, then we can just that issue's more or less done in it, which would be great.
Yeah, I think also David is pretty convinced by that now. But he worked on the issue, so I think someone else has to commit it, I guess.
I don't know. We do that for Drupal 8, but I think that's up to David whether he wants to do it for Drupal 7, because no one else really commits to Drupal 7 anymore. So he might just commit it.
Okay. So we still have some time left if we can use that.
Yeah. Should we discuss param converters a little?
Yeah, we can. Why not?
Yeah. So my take is I don't think so. My intuitive take is that if something is using something that is computed after the fact, does not break our system here. However, Wim thinks it could still break something, and the main thing I think we need is tests. However, if someone has not yet participated in that, I think it would be good to kind of talk about it a little more again. I'm not sure, Wim, if you want to do it, if you can get on, for example, Daniel's mic again.
Let's try if mine works. Doesn't work. I switched VPN location. It seems like it's working. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it worked via Daniel's mic, I think.
Yeah. Okay. The most expensive mic ever. Actually, it's a many-year-old iPhone headphone. So it's actually quite broken down. It works fine at home, but for some reason things are breaking down here. So actually, Fabian, I think you misrepresented things very slightly. I'm not sure if that was, maybe you just forgot about it, but I think there's two aspects to this problem. The first aspect is that a parameter that is given that is then upcasted into different variants. So for example, node arrow 5 is the raw parameter that is upcasted to the actual node 5 entity. That is fine. There is no problem. The problem there is that if it's translated, given depending on language negotiation, then it's using a cache context that is not explicit anywhere. And so that is the first problem. The problem is here that the same raw parameter results in a fundamentally different value object after upcasting. That is one problem. The problem you were just describing, and the one that you mentioned in your comments, number 17 on the issue, that is different, I think, because what is happening there is that over the time of a request, while the request is being answered, we do make modifications to an already upcasted entity, and that is a different problem. The problem there is, I think that Catch mentioned this somewhere on the issue, is, if I remember correctly, the hook entity view mode prepare or something like that, or hook entity storage load. Those hooks run at a later time, and therefore cause the object to change during the lifetime of the request. So depending on when you request a cache context, you get a different answer for the route cache context, because the route cache context looks at the parameters, currently the raw ones, but if we do need to support the translated ones and distinguish between them, then we need to look at the upcasted parameters. But if we do that, then depending on when the route cache context is being called, it actually is going to look at different objects, and therefore during the lifetime of a request, it actually changes the actual route cache context value. And those are the two distinct problems.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a re-update of what actually the problem is.
Sure. So 2 is only a problem if we do change the root context. But 1 is only a problem. Why would the root path not contain the language? Is it because it is stripped during routing? And if that's the case, should we just add the request path instead, kind of something that still contains the language negotiated thing? Because overall we said, yes, root, it is an implementation specific thing, that in core roots do not, let's say different. We said that root is a subset of URL in Drupal 8 core. So if root is actually removing information from URL, then I think that is a problem. And to behold, I'm not that worried about cache busting things. I think many people even say cache busting via URL is like a feature in that.
Isn't the problem that language negotiation not only depends on URL, but could also depend on session,
it should
count
not
user, the count user? I mean, the count user has configured a different URL language before.
But that does not matter, because the result is always the same for the same incoming data. The point is, if I will say this block is cached by root, and if I then go to root/n, and the same block is displayed, and then I go to the same block on the /de path for the German version, and the same block is displayed, then we have a more fundamental problem, because that means then that information during routing for the language negotiation is actually lost. But I don't think that's the case.
The thing is, it's not just URL though. Like the views UI param converter upcast based on session, and that arguably shouldn't exist, but it's there. We have the other issue that's possibly going to make all language negotiation to redirect, but that's not critical at the moment.
And that is also not for all language negotiation. It's just for the browser-based language negotiation. If a user has a preferred language, then if you go to node/5, if Pletch goes and sees it, looks at it, he will see it in Italian. I will see it in Dutch, and there is no difference in URL whatsoever.
Oh, and then on top of that, we've got config overrides, and that could be based on, I don't know, the user's current organic. I mean, there's all kinds of things we could base config overrides on.
Yeah, and actually, organic groups on Drupal.org have this, and I'm quite confused by it if you use it, but if you look at an organic group and I see groups of Drupal.org in English, if I go to the French group, suddenly all sorts of things are starting to show up in French. And there is no URL-based negotiation there. It's organic group-based, which is pretty advanced, but it's possible.
So we discussed this.
Just a hangout because you're saying one thing aloud and something else online right now, and I'm very confused.
We're live.
I
can hear you saying one thing.
Yesterday,
And then
there's a delay probably.
I think where we got to yesterday evening was that the param converters do need to provide cache context, but then we would have to apply them at the same place as we apply required cache context, which is to every single thing. And that would definitely fix this. I guess what Fabian's saying is that how much of an issue is it? But I think it is. Unless we really lock a lot of things down that we currently don't, I think we need to fix it. Like
Yes.
we bumped several other issues to critical to make this not a problem. I feel like.
But that means as soon as we do any user-based negotiation, for example, that the whole page is only cacheable by user, right?
It,
Not only things depending on the rule.
that's not. No, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be only cacheable per user. You would have to. What you would do at the moment, the page has the interface language cache context is required, but the content language cache context is not required. So when you run content language negotiation as part of Upcast, which is what entities do, then you would have to add the content language cache context as the context, and that would not be per user. Like the result of it would be per user, but the context isn't. It's just whatever the content language gets negotiated to. So
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's a combination of the two contexts.
And on top of that, it's also discussed that we could add the cache context for routes which do upcasting. Right? So in case like the front page, for the front page it would not matter.
Yes, exactly.
There's no upcasting going on the front.
Yeah, only when an upcast was run, it would add the cache context, but an upcast for a different route is going to have no effects. Yes.
So it sounds like the conclusion is we kind of have to do what I didn't catch. You said that the comments made since yesterday are not complete and didn't capture everything, but my high-level understanding is that the things that Larry wrote in comment 20 about adding a interface and allowing parameter converters to return cacheability metadata, that is the general plan of action.
Possibly I just didn't read that comment yet.
Okay.
No, I mean like you were speaking then. I heard Wim speaking.
Yeah, so I think some of the site problems are to be solved, like the browser language problem we have an issue for that I just pasted in chat earlier. But there's certainly the problem of config overrides, which may depend on whatever on Earth. Like it may be OG dependent or domain dependent or user dependent or time of day or I don't know. Whatever the overrider comes up with, and they need to be able to somehow bubble that up to the right place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So we have two different approaches, and I do think the add cache context is the one that is overall cleaner for that thing.
Okay, anything else? Any other pressing questions, concerns, arguments?
Well, it doesn't need to be during this call, but I'd appreciate if people could give me a quick feedback on the DX implied by the proof of concept I posted for the entity validation issue. Here is the link again in the chat. It should be very quick. Just tell me whether using these helper methods I'm proposing to define the form handlers makes any sense to people.
So the summary is that button level some handlers will invalidate form level ones.
Basically, the idea is that most of the time when we define the form level handlers, we are not expecting them not to be executed as soon as someone defines a button level handler. So the idea is to avoid changing the array API. The idea is to add a couple of helper methods on the form object to allow to declare a form handler either as a global handler or a button level button, an action specific handler, let's say. And if you define it as a global handler, it will just be added to all the available actions. So it does run even if contrib code adds new handlers to button level to buttons. Anyway, I realize having a feedback here now it's not ideal. Just wanted to point out that a feedback on the DX would be welcome, so that I can either go on with that approach or move on with something else. Otherwise, I'm a bit blocked.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that it needs some more time to understand, at least for me. Any other issues?
Yeah, so I'm working on the XSS issue to try and decouple it from safe markup, and I'm like coming across some inconsistencies in the way in which we escape titles. So, for example, if we put like a P tag in a node title, we escape it and we display it on the screen. If we put a P in like a vocabulary title or a term title, we strip it because we just use the XSS filter. But weirdly, we respect like EM tags and anything that's not stripped by the XSS filter in vocabulary and term titles. So if you create a vocabulary with like an a link to another page, it will actually work. Like, I don't even know why we would support that. Because A is in the list of allowed tags.
Yeah.
Do we know where that was introduced, or is it just inadvertent?
I don't know when it was introduced. I think it's probably always been the case. It's just it's like super inconsistent, like what we're doing. And then it's even weirder with usernames, With usernames, we have a validator, which means it's impossible to create an entity with like markup in the username. But then on the get username documentation, we say you have to check plain it, and then in the user controller, we don't check plain it, we XSS filter it.
I don't.
So, like, what do people think we should do? Because it seems like people have thought lots of different things throughout Drupal's history. Like, is it valid to have like an emphasis tag in a vocabulary title, and then have it show up as actual emphasized text?
At least at Drupal 6, there were contrib modules that used to let you do that.
Yeah.
And Views has offered it as a feature for Views blogs titles for years.
Yeah.
But it depends quite, I think, as to whether they let it. But I have seen sites that specifically wanted HTML in titles.
Yeah.
Make it work.
Yeah, it's funny that it's inconsistent between our entities now. So like, if different entities do completely different things, so now we're like really inconsistent, and it's like, I don't know. Anyway, that's what I'm stuck on. I will try and talk about it with other people outside of the call, because obviously people haven't got opinions on the call. So I'm done. So I guess we're done for today.
Yeah, the time's up also. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. I think it was a great meeting, and have fun, all of those who are in London. See you next week.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.